In the fall of 2010, I decided to go back to college. I was a single mom of 3 boys, but they were all in school now, so me going back was finally possible. The school that I went to is a regional campus to a very large university, and located in a neighborhood that is known for crime and other illegal activities. But it was only a 20-minute drive from my home, and I didn't feel unsafe about going there. The first day and first class were intimidating. I didn't know anyone, and I was a lot older than most students. I was 28 at the time. I sat down in the back of the room at a table, and a few minutes later, a lady who was around my age sat down next to me. She was very skinny, smelled like cigarettes, greasy hair, sunken eyes. But she started to talk to me and she seemed normal enough. She started off the normal conversation telling me that she chose to sit next to me because I was wearing the prettiest blouse in the room. Strange, but as an awkward person, I leave a lot of leeway for people to say or do awkward things before I think too deep about things. She didn't have a backpack, any books, a pen, a notebook, nothing. She said that her financial aid hadn't come through yet, but she didn't want to fall behind on classes and asked if she could share my book. I agreed, and I gave her a pen and paper also. After the first class, she asked if I would mind going to the library with her, so she could scan some of the pages to take home. I agreed, and we started to head to the library. She stops and she looks at her phone and says that her son had just texted her and needs her to come home to do something. She asks if I'll come with her. I tell her I have another class shortly and that I can't go with her. I ask if she still wants to go to the library first. She says no, and that she has to get to her son, but really can't go alone. I keep telling her that I can't go with her, and then she starts crying. At this point, we were in a common area outside, and the parking lot was to one side, and the library was to another. I tell her that I need to go to the library, and she's welcome to come, talk, whatever she needs, but I have to go. I didn't like being outside away from people, and with this woman anymore, and was trying to get back to a busier area. She gets really upset, starts screaming, and basically says, "F you" to me. She may have actually said, "F you." I can't remember how the interaction went exactly, because I was frozen in confusion by how quickly she had transitioned from friendly, then to crying and scared, and now to screaming in my face a slew of hateful, angry things. I turned around to start walking to the library, and called my friend so that I would have someone aware if this lady tried anything more than just screaming. I get to the library vestibule, and watch her through the glass doors. She is standing at the parking lot, and then a car pulls up with a man in it and is obviously upset with the woman. They're arguing, but I can't hear them from inside the vestibule. Eventually, she gets in the car and she leaves with him. The next day, I was dreading class because I didn't know what this woman's attitude would be that day. But she wasn't there the next day. In the end, she never came back to class. I didn't know her name or at the time how to look at a class roster. But looking back, I'm fairly certain she was not enrolled at the school at all, and for whatever reason was trying to get me to leave with her. I wish I knew her intentions, but at the same time, I'm glad that I never had to find out. I was in college. My roommate was a born-again Christian and she invited me to her Bible study in church all the time. Eventually, I went and I kept going. I wasn't a fan of the pastor, but there are a lot of nice young adults who like to have clean, sober fun. And I didn't drink or party, so I felt like I fit in. But I didn't agree with everything they believed in. Just the more normal stuff like God and helping the poor, and not some of the other things. And this one guy in my Bible study, Drew, was pretty quiet, good looking. He seemed like he knew everything about the Bible, which amazed me. I thought, I know nothing about all of this, but he is so wise. I was 21 and he was 27. He wasn't a college student, he just worked, which I later learned maybe he didn't. We were going to go on a young adult retreat, and because I worked, I couldn't leave early on Friday to drive up to the mountains with the girls in my group. Mutual friends said that I could ride with Drew, so I said, okay. On the way up, Drew was pretty quiet for the first hour. Not very friendly at all, and it was a long trip. But as we got closer to the mountains, he really warmed up. We got pizza and he paid, which was nice. And then he just stopped the car so we could just look at the stars. He even played some Brian McKnight. He was turning it into a date, but I didn't know it or see it that way then. I was starting to really like him, and I felt like we had a connection. He was just about to drop me off at the girls' cabin when he suddenly gets very serious and tells me that something happened between him and another girl in our church group, but she is telling lies about him and to not believe whatever I hear. He doesn't explain what exactly happened, and doesn't say who it is. I enter the cabin, and all the girls are there, and very quickly one girl, Bree, who is probably the youngest in the group, she's 19, tells all of us, "Ladies, there's a wolf in sheep clothing among us at this retreat." Now, if you don't know church folk, they get very dramatic and talk like this all the time, so I just thought, okay, here's some drama. She tells us this story about how she was talking to some guy here, but he started stalking her and wouldn't take no for an answer, and he even threatened her sister. Now, my spidey sense is up and I realized this must be what Drew was telling me about. The church group doesn't know who it is because she won't say, because she doesn't want to gossip and says leadership will handle it. Well, Drew eventually leaves the weekend retreat early. There goes my ride back, I thought. I don't know if he was asked to leave or what. That week though, Drew asked me to hang out and we do. I still like him, and I don't know who to believe. On our hangout, we don't really do anything. He takes me to the mall and he reads the Bible to me. Okay, cool. And then he parks his car on some suburban lookout, the top of the world type of thing, and just says that he is a view guy who really likes views. I'm not one to be impressed by suburban lights, so I'm just like, okay, this is boring. I give him another chance. I invite him to come see a play with me. When he comes, he immediately meets one of my friends, Brian. Brian introduces us to his boyfriend, Nick. I'm in theater, and I have a lot of gay friends. Well, for the majority of the rest of the date, Drew lectures me about how it's wrong, and I must not really love him if I don't stop to tell him that. I eventually cry because it is this ugly argument in his car we are having for hours in the parking lot of Panera. I say I want to go home, that this is basically the worst date ever. I don't agree with what he says. He also tells me that I need to give up my dream of being an actress because what if the Lord doesn't want me to do that? Theater is something I did my whole life, not to mention my major, and his reasons for me giving it up had nothing to do with the impracticality of it, but because of God. This guy was nuts. I get home and I offer to make us some cocoa to just kind of end things as friends, or at least on a better note. I know that I'll see him at church and we have mutual friends and are in the same Bible study. Things got weird. He tried to get sexual with me, but then also blamed me for tempting him. How with my tear-stained, exhausted face? I ended up crying again. I just wanted him to go home, but I was so emotionally exhausted. I didn't know what to make of this. He calls and texts me that week, and I don't respond. Then it's a Sunday night. I'm talking to my friend Tim, who no longer goes to this church anymore. I tell him that I went on a date with Drew. Before I can tell him how it went, Tim says, "What? That guy is crazy. You need to abort that mission." Tim tells me that he is close with Bree and her family, and Drew is a stalker and he threatened Bree's sister. I don't know what to believe because it sounds like Tim believes this just based on Bree's story. I hang up and I call my mom to try to tell her what happened, what Tim had told me about Drew, and how it was such weird timing considering what had happened with me. While I'm on the phone with my mom, I get a knock at the door. It is 10 p.m. on a Sunday night. I look out, but no one is there. I go to get my roommate to ask her if she can just sit with me in the front room, because I'm freaked out and I think someone is there. There's another knock at the door. I open it and it's Drew, and he looks all in a frenzy. I ask him what he's doing here, and he said he just needed to talk to me, and I wasn't answering my phone, which was because I was generally busy earlier in the day. The conversation is getting long and my roommate is still sitting there, so I tell her she can go back to her room and that it's okay. I let him come in, because I am conditioned to be overly nice. This was a big mistake. We start talking, and as soon as my roommate is gone, he pulls out a knife. He starts saying how he was worried my neighbors did something to me because I wasn't responding to him, and he didn't know what kind of situation he would be walking into. I have zero fighting skills, no experience in this situation at all, so I calmly say as casually as possible, "Hey, can you just put the knife away? It makes me feel uncomfortable." He asked me if I want the knife, and I say, "No, I just want to pretend that it isn't here." I somehow talk him down and get him to leave. I think I convince him that he still has a shot with me somehow. The next morning, my mind is clearer, and I feel like I need to tell my mom what happened. She has me tell my dad, who has me tell the church youth leader and security at my apartment. I tell the cop the whole story, and he says that this guy is definitely a stalker, and that I will see him again unless the police call him. I say, "It's fine, I think everything will be okay, there's no need to call." I just didn't want any more drama. I had never talked to the police about anything before. I was still processing and I didn't understand that this was really serious. My mistake. The next night, I went to a party, another church-related one, but Drew is not supposed to be here. He told me that he wasn't going. Well, he is there. I decided to leave, but my 21-year-old self doesn't think to ask to have someone walk me out. I figure if I leave and he's still there, problem solved. I didn't anticipate him realizing that I left and following me. I'm walking to my car in a dark apartment parking lot and I hear him call out my name. He's following me. I start running and I say that I don't want to talk. And then he chases me. I'm clicking my car to open thinking, oh, this is how the girl dies because she did not let the cop call the stalker because she's dumb. But thankfully, my car unlocks, I get in, and I drive away. The problem is, this guy knows where I live. I move out 2 weeks later, and I block him on all social media on my phone. Drew eventually somehow managed to make another Facebook profile, and sent me a message that summer saying he was praying for me, and that he had forgiven me for trashing him to people, even though I still never told anyone what had happened. Except for the useless pastor who did nothing. That was the last that I saw or heard from him. Unfortunately, this predator continues to serve at that church in the junior high ministry of all places, among many young girls. No one on church leadership listened to me or to Bree, who both complained that this guy was stalking us. I never reached out to Bree to let her know what had happened to me, and I never got to hear her story in detail. But I had told the younger adult pastor about the knife and him trying to get sexual with me and how I was scared. Thankfully, I don't go to that church anymore. What sucks is, I have had a few experiences with crazy religious dudes. This was the first but not the last. I'm still trying to come to terms with why that is. My first semester of freshman year in college, I had a history class at 9 a.m. The class had at least 50 people, but I literally knew no one. I was fine with that. The lectures were actually interesting. We had minimal homework, and the class wasn't hard at all. I sat towards the back of the class. So, one day out of nowhere, I got an email on my college email account. It was some random guy that was like, "Hey, I'm Joe. I'm in your history class. How do you like it?" Or something along those lines. I thought this was really creepy because not only did I have no idea who Joe was, but also, who uses a school email to start talking to someone? I got his name from the email account and decided to look him up on Facebook, thinking maybe I knew this guy or something. That's when I discovered that about 2 weeks before the email had been sent, he had requested to be my friend on Facebook, and I hadn't responded because I had no idea who he was. He also messaged me 11 times and Facebook called me. Okay, what the heck? So, I spoke to my roommate and her friend that night about it. They basically told me that I should just message him and tell him that I'm not interested. I messaged him back on Facebook and told him basically, no thanks. He seemed to get the message and it was fine. I looked for him in class next Monday and realized that he sat about 4 rows in front of me near the middle of the class. He would fully turn to stare at me throughout the class, and I considered telling the professor because he made me so uncomfortable. Thankfully, we only had a couple of weeks left. After the class was over, I figured I wouldn't see him again. Different majors, he was older, and I didn't really think about him. I had a math class on the other side of campus next semester. I could have taken the trolley, but I normally like to take the 15-minute walk to get there. One day, as I walked in the building, I saw Joe walking out. I basically opened the door to go in as he was standing there about to leave. He didn't even move and he just stared at me, waiting for me to walk past him. By the way, he was easily over 6 foot and pretty big. His demeanor really made me feel weird, but I pushed past him and I went into class. When the class was over, I walked out to head back to my dorm when I saw Joe just hanging around the building, alone. I started walking, and he began walking like 6 feet behind me. Okay, weird, but maybe he's just going somewhere. After a couple of minutes, I got more and more nervous about him, and I spotted 2 of my roommate's friends in front of me walking to the dorm as well. I literally inserted myself into their conversation and was just like, "Hi, I know you barely know me, but please walk with me. I'm being followed." And they were really cool about it. He continued to follow us until we came to a crosswalk. He walked past us, turning to stare directly at me. And the look he gave me freaked out the 2 girls I was with so much that they suggested we take the long way back to our rooms. We did. And despite the fact that we should have seen him again on this path, we didn't. The weirdest part of all of this is why he was hanging around the building. He had been walking out as I went in. My class was over an hour, so he should have been long gone by then. The only restaurant on that side of campus was closed by then, and if he had had class, he would have still been in it. I got out a couple of minutes early. So was he literally just waiting for me to leave? I honestly don't really want to know. Joe, let's not meet again. I'm a South Asian female. This happened when I was in my first year of engineering, and this was almost 10 years ago. Harmless ragging was a thing back then, and as juniors, we were asked for no more than to sing a song or to imitate a professor and such silly stuff. This one senior guy named Adish happened to come across me in one of these silly ragging sessions, and apparently found me interesting and cute. I wore shorts a lot, and he even nicknamed me as Sassy Pants, and he yells it out loud whenever he sees me on campus, irrespective of the crowd of people. He tries to get my number through my classmates and hostel mates, and tries to get to add me on Facebook. When I don't respond, he threatens my friends to force me into talking to him. I do cause I just don't want him to get beat up. I obviously don't want to cause any problems as I was barely 18, and I was away from home for the first time. Adish keeps asking me to go out with him, and I keep refusing. One day, I'm at the local ATM to take out some money, and it's a small room with just the machine. I didn't know he was there because I'm facing the inner area, and he walks in and he stands against the only door of that enclosure. I turn around in a panic thinking that I'm about to be robbed, but it's this guy who says, "Come on, I'll take you to campus on my bike." I refuse and he won't let me out. The guard luckily comes and he obviously has to move. I share this with my friends and they are horrified too. Now the stalking begins. He messaged me on Facebook and says what color dress I wore and if something noteworthy happened in the lectures that I attended each day. He challenges me to find out how he is able to know so much. He knows my routine so well, he comes down to my hostel and openly asks me to go out with him, in front of all, including the maintenance staff. I again avoid responding and I'm mortified. I threaten him that if he interferes in my life, I will report his behavior to the dean and other authorities. But the creep responds, "It's not like I asked you to sleep with me. I have tons of girls who want to be with me, and I ignore them all for you. I know girls play the hard-to-get card, but this is way too arrogant for you." This goes on for 6 months, nearing the end of the semester. Thankfully, he is in the final year and will graduate and get the heck out of here. That was the only thought keeping me from having a nervous breakdown. On the day of the Foundation Day celebration on campus, it's evening and he calls on my phone and asks me to meet him one last time. I ignore his calls as usual. He calls one of my friends and threatens to throw acid on her, which she tearfully calls me and informs me, leaving me visibly shaken. I tell my friends about this. We are all still thick even after 10 years after college, knock on wood. And they, my loyal soldiers, say, okay, if he wants to talk to you one last time, fine, let him, but in front of all of us. I tell him that and he comes over to campus where the event is still ongoing. My entire group of friends step out, 7 of us including me, which has 4 guys, and meet him nearby. He asks in mock politeness if he can talk to me alone, and even before I can respond no, my friends are like, either you talk to her in front of all of us, or you don't talk to her at all. He conceded and he spoke some rubbish romantic talk which doesn't matter, and he finally leaves. A few days later, it's their graduation day, and I've thankfully never seen or heard from him since. So, I live in supported housing. This means that I basically have a room in a house that I share with others who have learning disabilities. When my best friend moved in, this one particular tenant, who we soon started calling Creeper, full-on stalked her. He would lurk outside our room late at night, waiting for her to come out. If she didn't come out, he would go outside and knock on her window. He would watch her come out of the shared bathroom from the top of the stairs. He tried to kiss her, and one time touched her on the shoulder and said he was looking after her, when a support worker asked what he was doing. He also waited on the stairs when her and I came back from a trip at like 11:30 at night. Needless to say, we waited around the side of the building until he went away. He also watched her through his blinds, and he's been warned at least 3 times by support workers to leave her alone. Now here's the worst part. He's 45 and she's 22. And he has a girlfriend who he's been with for 10 years, but he doesn't like her very much, judging by the frustrated phone calls he has with her on the daily. Now, he also displayed a milder form of this behavior when I moved in, but he started leaving me alone within a few months. But the difference with my friend is that he is infatuated with her. Not only is he emotionally and physically trying to cheat on his girlfriend, who he doesn't even seem to like, but he's been doing it since my friend moved in, which was at the beginning of the year. He needs to be charged with something, and his girlfriend needs to dump him. He needs to be thrown out of the house too. But people keep giving him an excuses not to have him punished, and I'm sick of it. If it weren't for whatever he has, he'd be in prison. I wanted to share this because I'm done with him. I want him to leave my friend alone. I want him out of the house. The staff aren't doing anything about it, so I'm going to take matters into my own hands. But what should I do? So, this is my second time writing in this sub. I'm a female in my early 20s, and I filed a police report and have already told the story to those close to me. But I feel like venting about my piece of crap ex-housemate to you guys, and then it would make me feel a little bit better. Kareem is somewhat close to his name, so I'll use that. Now, I'm not very good at reading people, unlike my landlord. When I first met Kareem, he seemed polite enough. He was super tidy, filled the house with amazing smelling cooking, and best of all, he stayed out of my way. I'm kind of a loner and stayed holed up in my room with the company of my gerbils to quietly study and play Minecraft. We didn't cross paths often when the school year had started in September. He was the replacement for my housemate. It's a 3-bedroom apartment, and I had been living with another girl, Nellie, for a year already. She was pretty absent from the house, and as she was almost always at her boyfriend's place, and the third housemate had moved out. Early on, he was honest of his past that I should have taken as a warning, but took him as being earnest. I had asked him during the mini-interviewing process that Nellie and I were holding for potential tenants if he was 420 friendly. He was, but as it turned out, he was a little too friendly. A couple years ago, he had been arrested for illegal possession of weed and sent back to his home country of Turkey for a year before being allowed back into Canada to continue his studies. I didn't know how this kind of stuff works, to be honest, but that's what he told us. I try not to be a judgmental person, since he made it seem like it was a thing of the past. I learned this was not the case. One of the first things I noticed in September was that he smoked almost constantly. Not to the point of missing classes, but the whole house would stink up multiple times a week in the evening. Normally, I wouldn't mind a little smoke, but any stoner will tell you that each strain is different, and for whatever reason, his weed had caused really severe panic attacks for me. Around late October, I got sick of his stuff and told him to figure out how to contain it to his room, and he said that his joints are hard to contain, and that he really needed a bong. So I let him borrow mine. About 2 weeks later, in November, Kareem said that he had broken the downstem, but that he would replace it. Within a few days, he did replace it, but it was the wrong size. Maybe it was a bit picky of me, but I told him to buy the right size, and he refused, said that it was too expensive. I mean, I don't know, it's my property and he broke it. He should fix it appropriately, right? Let me know if that request was out of line. What I know was not out of line, however, was what I did after what happened in mid-February. Around January, my landlord said we should start looking for new housemates, which was reasonable enough. Not to Kareem, though. My landlord had always been slower responding to messages due to the nature of her job, but he absolutely hated her guts for it. Called her awful things and every name under the sun behind her back, which made me feel weird considering I had been her tenant for 3 years now and we were on good terms. Before I move on to the next part, I would like to quickly add that at one point during the housemate hunting process, he asked me if I would be willing to move out so that his friends could move in, and that it would be super amazing if I did. Obviously, I said no. My landlord later confirmed that he had asked her if he could sign the lease behind my back. As I mentioned earlier, we had forged a good rapport over the last 2 years, so it was a firm no. Kareem had got excessively antagonistic about my landlord's deadline when she wanted us to sign the lease. Started looking at the law, saying he legally didn't need to give her notice until X date, which wasn't true. He told me to quietly look for housemates and tell the landlord at the last possible date, which made me super uncomfortable since it was around midterms, and was secretly grateful she was pushing for the deadline so strongly. I just wanted it over with. It was shortly before I signed the lease with my new housemates that he showed how truly two-faced he was. I dug through our Facebook messages, The gist of the conversation was this. Kareem, can I use your laundry after I move out? I don't have laundry on site. Sorry, no, that's kind of weird. No, it's not. We'll pay you. We? Yeah, me and my housemates. Note, I never met these housemates before and still have no idea who they are. At this point, I started getting extremely weirded out. I said no a few times, but caved and started saying stuff like, I'll think about it, to appease him. Though I had zero intent of letting him use my stuff. It seemed like the best way to get him off my back since for almost a week he had continuously pressured me and to try to get me to say yes. Things hit the first of two crescendos when, the day before, me and the two new tenants I chose, super awesome dudes by the way, were supposed to sign the new lease. Back to Facebook, and again, an approximation of our conversation. If you don't promise to let me use your laundry next year, I'm going to make a scene in front of your housemates. A scene. When they come sign the lease with her, I'm going to tell them how awful our landlord is, that she doesn't care about us and is terrible at replying to our messages. If you let me use your laundry, I'll wait until they leave to tell her to her face. In other words, he was going to make my new housemates question my judgment and make them think that I was a bad person or something. Why else would he go off in front of them and my landlord and tell me she was a horrible and nasty person? He later claimed that these messages were a joke to which I messaged back asking where the punchline was, because I didn't see it. I felt like a badass saying that, not gonna lie. Especially since he never got around to explaining the supposed joke. At this point, I had a bit of a breakdown. I called my landlord that night when Kareem had left the house for a few hours, letting her know exactly what had happened, and what he was planning to do the next day, even sending our screenshots of our Facebook messages, and telling her that I couldn't let her and my new housemates come over in good conscience. Call me a snitch, I don't care. This guy does martial arts 3 times a week and, despite being shorter than me, could definitely send me through drywall if he felt like it. I felt threatened and didn't want to know what he would do if he found out that I told her, and was the reason signing the lease was rescheduled to a different time and location. She believed me, especially when she read all the text messages. Full context, nothing conveniently cropped. She even saw the parts where I was playing along and calling her names too. That's when she told me that she had seen straight through his act while he was signing the lease. Apparently, he spent half an hour reading and rereading our lease, which is abnormal, asking weird questions and being rude to her. After years of being a landlord, she could clearly see that he's the type of overly macho guy that likes to control women, but gave me the benefit of the doubt. I'm inclined to agree, especially looking in hindsight at how he's treated the women, me, the landlord, and Nellie, versus men, Nellie's boyfriend and my male friends, in our lives. So, I signed the lease with my new housemates the next day at a coffee shop, telling Kareem that it was out of the blue that we were signing elsewhere, and that I had no idea why we had changed plans, and I thought that I had gotten away with telling on him. Until my landlord sent him a letter from her lawyer that we had very clearly stated that he would not be allowed to demand the use of the laundry again, and that if he came back to the house after moving out, it would be considered trespassing. At first, I thought it was an overreaction on her part, but looking back on those messages, I can see why she made that decision. He angrily knocked on my door and shoved the letter in my hands when he got in that day, aggressively and quite frankly, melodramatically saying, "You betrayed me." I kid you not, those were his exact words. I think he lost his grip on me since he could no longer pressure me now that the secret was out, which frustrated him. Things then settled down temporarily. He would retaliate in small ways, going out of his way not to sort the recycling in proper bins, not cleaning out the shower drain, putting plastic and metal in the compost bin, and smoking weed excessively, They were small, but they irritated me. It was the day after he moved out that we reached our second and final crescendo, which led to the police report from the initial paragraph. After months of stuffing a shirt under the crack of my door to keep the weed stink out, and generally being freaked out to the point of carrying a small kitchen knife in my pocket whenever I left my room after the laundry incident, you can bet your butt I was counting down those last days gleefully. He said that he left a few things behind from the kitchen. He came along with a friend and we sorted out whose Tupperware was whose. On his way out, he spotted my mop and bucket. He claimed that it was his and that he wanted it back. I had had this mop and bucket for 2 years. Why the heck was he claiming that it was his? I said no and he started roaming around the house, saying that he wanted his mop and bucket, and that if this was mine, his must be elsewhere, which made me uncomfortable as hell. I diffused the situation by saying I wanted to use it, and I would give it back later. I was planning on keeping it. I am under zero obligation to let him back in. Remember the letter that said him coming back in the house after he moves out is trespassing, and he instantly snapped out of it. Later that day, he even said that I could keep it. Why he changed his mind is beyond me. The next day, Kareem said he had left 2 more items behind. I was irritated at this point. I just wanted to be left alone. I said I would leave it outside. I admit I definitely shouldn't have done what I did next. I was annoyed and I cringe when I read my own messages, but his reaction was completely out of proportion. Kareem said, "Yeah, I'll stop by in a few hours. I just got out of the shower. I'm busy, can't you come by now? Just throw on some shoes and shorts and a t-shirt, nobody's outside." By the way, at this point, my town had been on lockdown for 2 months. Since it's a university town and I live in an area almost exclusively populated by students, nearly everyone was gone and it had been a ghost town for weeks. I should also note that he had not been taking good social distancing measures whenever he was over, and had zero problem getting him close even though he had recently been to a much bigger city with a bad outbreak. Just thought that I would point that out. Fine, then give me my mop and bucket. You said that I could have it. Give it back. No. I put the 2 items, a tray and a mug, on the porch. A few minutes later, I heard a polite knock. I knew it was him and I ignored it. A few seconds later, a ring on the doorbell. Another ring, a louder knock. He kept ringing the doorbell over and over. Exasperated, I opened it and he stood there smiling. "Give me my mop and bucket." No. I quickly shut the door. Truth be told, I was worried he would try to stick his foot in the door and try to stop me from closing it, but he didn't move. He started knocking again, and ringing the doorbell repeatedly. At first, it was with some time in between, a few seconds, but it grew in frequency and volume. It went from firm knocking to louder, angry knocking. It felt like I was running a marathon, my heart was beating so fast. Since he started up straight up pounding on the door so hard that I could see it move, literally screaming, "Give me my stuff," over and over at the top of his lungs. After about 2 or 3 minutes of him being aggressive in doing this, I can assure you it felt like hours. He stopped and I heard this weird metallic scraping sound, like metal on concrete, accompanied by a grunt, followed by a loud metallic clang. Then silence. I waited for a while. I stealthily looked through the windows and didn't see him. I opened the door and to my surprise, saw that he had pulled my mailbox off the wall and thrown it onto the path leading to the sidewalk. I kicked myself for not filming the incident, but took my sweet time taking the perfect picture to show that he had made some kind of attempt to destroy the property. I mean, not much that I can do. It felt like the right thing to do, nonetheless, and I still have it. I ended up putting the mop and bucket outside and telling Kareem to come get it, and I just wanted to leave me alone. I even took out the battery of our door code since a part of me is paranoid it would try to guess it and break in. He came by and took it, and I watched him leave from the window. He hasn't contacted me since. I saw him on the street the other day and he gave me a warm smile as if we were friends, but I looked away and crossed to the other side to avoid him. I filed a police report of the incident the same day, as advised by my landlord. She told me during our phone call that he had a documented history of aggression, and I'm not shocked. I'm surprised she gave me the benefit of the doubt though, and let him sign the lease in the first place. I guess this was a learning experience for us all. When I asked her of her honest opinion of my new housemates, she said they were trustworthy. Plus, it turns out that the guys and I have a mutual buddy, so I'm not scared of them. I told them about the whole incident and they blocked him on Facebook. They were super supportive and I'm glad that I filed a report. They know who he is and they won't let him inside. The thing that freaks me out a little is that he moved down the street. I can see his new unit from my window. I can't really say let's not meet again since we live so close and we'll inevitably cross paths on the street in the future. But I can confidently and without hesitation say, Kareem, get effed.